Okay, thank you very much. Well, good morning, everyone. I hope you're all keeping well. I hear there's the promise of snow on the way, but it's quite sunny here. I don't know what it's like for the rest of you. It's quite warm outside, so could just be the calm before the snowstorm. Anyway, we've got a couple of things to discuss this week. Hopefully you can all see my slides okay. So as normal, I'm joined by Gareth. Hi, Gareth.
Morning.
And also Liz. Hi, Liz.
Hi.
And we have Jake marshalling. Hi, Jake.
Hi, yep.
And I'm not too certain whether Laura is going to join us. She quite often comes on a bit late. But we haven't got Naomi or Kevin with us today. They're both away. I believe Naomi's on holiday, and I don't know what Kevin's up to, probably horse rustling or something like that. So he calls it volunteering, but we all know. Right, okay, so we've got a couple of things. I've carried on discussion point that we didn't tackle last, which is entitled The Perfect Storm. And Kevin's not here to do a council tax or business rates update, but there's a couple of bits I just want to pick up. So just as a reminder for anybody who is new with us today, what we tend to do is you just raise your hand electronically if you want to join in the conversation, or you can type stuff into the discussion box, and Jake will bring that to our attention as we go through. But otherwise, just hopefully you'll all have something to say. But anyway, I'm going to start off with actually giving a bit of information from the world of council tax and business rates. We're coming back to the old subject again, the COVID-19 fraud. I noticed today that the Treasury has admitted they'll only recover £1 of every £4 stolen from the public purse by fraudsters. So far, the department has written off 4.3 billion of 5.8 billion that was defrauded from its emergency COVID-19 schemes. That includes the furlough scheme, the self-employed income support program, and the Eat Out to Help Out. I don't know about garden parties if they're specially funded. But anyway, it's probably no great surprise. Liz, I guess you're not surprised to hear that they're not recovering the money.
No, well, I'm not surprised. The Eat Out to Help Out, I imagine that comes from restaurants and hospitality claiming for things that actually didn't happen.
Yeah, I should imagine so. Claiming.
To be honest with you, I can't really remember what the scheme was, apart from the fact that you got
a cheap meal and the
you got a
government
cheap
paid for
meal.
the rest of it.
So I suppose I'm just trying to think what the fraud. I suppose the fraud would be claiming for meals that weren't taken.
Yes.
I think if you put £5 yourself in as a restaurant owner, they gave you £10 back. So that seems to be a pretty good deal.
Yes. I actually am very open to fraud, I would have thought.
Well, I mean, all of these schemes are always going to be open to fraud. I mean, simply by the virtue of the fact that there is a scheme there, organised fraudsters.
Yeah, but my point is here that it's quite an easy fraud, isn't it, really?
Yes, yeah.
So, cash-based frauds always are.
Yeah.
Well, sometimes they're a bit tricky, aren't they, when you think about it? But this one strikes me as being particularly easy.
I'm feeling a bit disappointed, actually. I guess we probably ought to know more about the schemes and therefore be better able to fiddle them.
Really, I think I think that's what I'm getting at, as I can't remember what the Eat Out to Help Out scheme was. I remember the self-employed income support program and thinking, well, that was pretty open to fraud as well. What it all is, you're quite right. Every single bit of it is open to misinformation and fraud.
It is. I see Laura is eating out.
I am, sorry.
No, that's fine. Glad to see you here, Laura. The only thing I wanted to pick up on this is 4.3 billion is quite substantially more, isn't it, Laura, than the benefit fraud that they claim exists at 1.2 at the moment.
Absolutely, but what I would say about the benefit fraud side, Malcolm, is I think they have underestimated the problem. I'm not going to lie. I mean, I've come across easily 10 to 15 people that have had their national insurance numbers, and I'm going to be generous here and say incorrectly typed in on the application form. They haven't done due diligence at the DWP, and they've made people have benefit that haven't actually claimed for the benefit. So I'll give you an example. I have a neighbour here in my row who's flown up the row here going, Laura, I've been overpaid by £1,500 and I've never claimed from the DWP. But when I look at it, the first thing it says to me, it says joint claim on it. So that person doesn't get a mandatory reconsideration because they don't know who the joint claim is with. But somehow that person who is single or not with anybody else has been told that they've got an overpayment and they don't know how it's occurred. So we've obviously done our letter back to the DWP and said we've got a problem and we need to report this for fraud. And the DWP goes, we're not going to give you the evidence. So I'm not sure if that's them not wanting to report how much fraud there is in the system, how much error there is in the system. But the DWP will not give you evidence to justify that you have A, received money, and B, actually made that application. So how can they take that 1,500 quid off of you? So we've now put a mandatory reconsideration in and we're going to go to tribunal on it, and let's discuss it with the tribunal. Then we might get to see the evidence in front of us.
Yeah, I know. It's always been the same though, hasn't it?
It has always been the same. And I think that's really sad, that situation we are, where the DWP's initial intention is absolutely right. Let's get the money out. Let's support people. Let's not have people poor. And it's not often the government give out money, let's be honest. And then what's happened is it's been exploited or misunderstood by people. I'm going to be, generous in that mind. And instead of saying, actually, I've made a mistake, we're just going to bury it in the publicity, font 6 on page 27 of the Daily Mail, and not actually deal with the problem.
Just as an aside, if they won't give her the evidence, put in a subject access request.
Well, that was my next port of call, was that and the MP.
Sorry, Kim, you wanted to come in.
Just a quick thing on that point. I'm trying to remember where I read it, but it was only last week, and it may very well have been through a RightsNet newsletter, that the government acknowledged that there's been some errors made, and that people who have received notifications to pay back universal credit that they've never received will not have to do so. I will go back after this meeting. I will go back over emails, etc., and if I can find that, I'll put it on the chat or put it out on the WhatsApp group so everybody can see it.
That's great. Thank you, Kim, because I can't be the only one with suffering with that. There's lots of people ringing up going, I don't know who you are, but what's this number about? Absolutely. So thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving on. There was a Grant Ombudsman case this week. It was an investigation that found that the grants, a couple of grants that were paid out by Camden, or actually not paid out by Camden, didn't pay them out because they were unaware of changes in circumstances to the two ratepayers occupying business premises on the 11th of March. The council argued that the government guidance did not require it to make payments, even though it held incorrect information. The bottom line is they thought it was a fraudulent claims. They didn't want to pay them out. But the Ombudsman found that the council had incorrectly interpreted the guidance as it referred to the central business ratings list, which had up-to-date information rather than the authority's own database. So fundamentally, the information that the Camden held on its database was wrong, and that's what they were working on. The Ombudsman says, no, there are better sources of information, and you should go with that instead. So that's kind of one of those things that can be lurking around. The details of the case are here for anybody who wants to read them. I'll send out the slides afterwards. Okay, so yeah, it's very small writing, Laura, but I'll send it out later for everybody to read the details.
It is, but I'm interested. Sorry.
Yes, okay, I will send it to you, I promise.
Oh,
I'm
thank you.
interested in how the databases can be so different, as it were. I mean, is there not some kind of automatic reconciliation?
No, and that's what I probably need to maybe explain here. And that's why I was interested in that. Is obviously you get the schedule, and they must be behind on their schedules. But in reality, you would check the schedules are up to date, and they probably didn't in order to obviously put all the on. And that is quite interesting how the Ombudsman has obviously fared in the fact that you should use all the information available to you, because again, please don't think I'm shooting people down here, but in a benefits world, that to us is absolutely plain common sense. And at the moment, whilst I'm covering a Revs and Ben service, it's very apparent revenues do work in a very different way. They work very black and white with what's in front of them, and they don't necessarily think a bit wider than the box. So that's interesting.
I would say ordered, not black and white, but in an ordered way.
Ordered way, yes. Red or blue?
No.
Right. Okay, so let's move over to the perfect storm, and hopefully everybody's got something to say on this. Now, Boris Johnson has been urged by Conservative MPs to address what they say will be a cost of living crisis for many in 2022. In fact, they're not the only ones saying that there is a cost of living crisis for many. Some 20 parliamentarians said rising energy prices would pose more of a problem for the consumers in the UK than other comparable countries, and the government should cut VAT on fuel bills and remove environmental levies. Environmental levies are quite interesting, aren't they, Gareth? Because they're...
Because I don't know anything about them.
Oh, right, okay. Well, it's
I will say that cutting VAT seems to me to be a bonkers idea, because basically you're giving more money to, again, people who have bigger bills who tend to be better off.
Yeah. Mm. Yes, and the environmental levies is really sort of like taxation through bills, through the energy bills, rather than actually taxation where you might be able to deal with it. So the letter was published as a poll of voters in the red wall seats said that the Tories had gained in 2019 were somewhat concerned, saying that family finances are going to get worse over the next year. So this is why I think it's a perfect storm. These are the pressure points, at least ways 4 of the pressure points. Cost of living, according to the Resolution Foundation, could rise by for the average household by 1,200, and this is going to be one of the key political issues. I think we're going to be returning to this. Brexit itself, how does that affect things? Well, it's affecting the supply chain. There's the custom border tariffs. There's regulations. There's impacts on workforce. There's impacts on things like IP and data transfer we've not even got into yet, but are going to be difficult. Liz, which one of these do you think will be the worst?
I think very probably what people will feel is the worst are energy bills and the basic cost of living in the shops, which is inflation. Actually, it is a perfect storm, isn't it? Because, I mean, talking from a personal point of view, I mean, I resent all of these. So, well, yeah, we're all going to feel that way. And also, I think people don't, you said that the environmental taxes on energy bills, well, people don't understand that. I don't understand it. Gareth doesn't understand it. I know what you're saying, that actually maybe it should be taken away from that and just put into direct taxation. That's what we want to do. But it doesn't make a hill of beans difference, does it really? Because actually all these things are still going to happen.
Except that the impact is so kind of unfair that the impact is going to be on the poorest.
I suspect
all of the kind of solutions that the MPs and the Tories are proposing benefit the better off far more.
Yes, I still suspect that I think there's a vague possibility that they will do the VAT thing and abolish VAT because, well, it's doing something, isn't it? It seems to me that, you know, a lot of the policy is flailing around in the dark. You know what I mean? We've made such a song and dance about, you know, environment and climate change, and that's been a thing of, you know, of this government. So what do they do about the environmental taxes, which undoubtedly would benefit people on their energy bills if they were removed, or at least even, you know, muted for a period?
Yeah, but they're not benefiting the people that need it most. I mean, if you're a hedge fund manager and you've got your collection of vintage cars all heated to 90 degrees or something, then the VAT's going to help you a great deal.
Yes, I agree.
I'm very large amount.
I'm just thinking in terms of optics. You know how it works.
Oh yes. Yeah.
But setting the optics to one side for a minute, Laura, how is this impacting on service delivery? Because this is cranking up. Inflation at the moment is 6%. When we discussed inflation last year, the predictions were by this time of the year it may have got to a heady 5%. And, you know, that's what the economists were telling us. And almost anybody who doesn't like economists, e.g. the Daily Mail, was saying, oh, no, that's never going to happen. But it's now 6%. It's not. They got it wrong. It's higher. It's 6%. And it looks like it'll be 7% over the next couple of months.
I read a nice comment last week that I must repeat, which was that economists have put on earth make astrologers look good.
That's very good. Well, interestingly, I mean, I've come from a meeting this morning where we were talking about, from Oxford City Council's point of view, collecting commercial rents. Do we collect the commercial rent to increase our cash flow? But where we have got 2 or 3 major streets in the city that's got all their shops on and whatnot, these shops come and can't afford, and we then end up shutting them down because they've got no cash flow to purchase items. So then we make our local public, in effect, redundant or under greater pressure. So we have the issues from our point of view of we are renting out all different parts of our building, but we're moving, for example, voluntary sector into our customer services, and then we're going into the libraries. And all you're doing is moving one problem to another problem, because the problem that they were sitting in the shop in the first place, that's now got no rental charge on it, and we'll end up paying the business rates on it. And it was a really interesting conversation this morning in terms of the city. How do we decide at what point do we collect our outstanding bills, to consider the local working economy, to consider how we develop and going forward? So the issue is whether we're going to be a carbon-free zero zone by 2026, because that's one of our agendas. So whilst we're talking about energy bills, is this a prime opportunity to consider that all of our buildings, for example, that we rent out should be solar powered and all the rest of it, and therefore take off the pressure for our tenants to mean that they could probably afford their rent going forwards? Now that is an injection of cash from the council. Where do we sit on electric cars? You know, so are we going to put all the power points in the base of your lamp posts and things and make these charging points so that we don't have, and we've got a zero economy, zero emissions level in the city, but we still allow people to travel into the city because we have a hell of a lot of public transport moving and tourism? And if we change our zero emissions, is that going to affect tourism over the next couple of years? So I think, I know it sounds ridiculous, but all of those, to an extent, Malcolm, have an impact, because I think you've maybe missed one off there, and that sounds stupid. To me, it's the world. What's happening on with the rest of the world? What is Mr. Putin doing, because he does your gas supply? What's happening with, you know, America? Because normally with America, if they crash, the rest of the world crashes. And whilst I appreciate that Mr. Sunak has done a very marvellous job locally for the UK, because we don't have much stability within our own economy, such as a manufacturing and all the rest of it, we tend to be quite tertiary as a sector. We are reliant on import-export. And if nobody else can afford to buy our products, we're gone. And I think that's a real big thing for me. I mean, this whole Kazakhstan thing, I'm proper worried about it, because before you know it, we end up in a war. Where's that money coming from?
That's true enough. Can I let Claire come in?
Sure.
Good morning. Good morning.
Hi,
Thank
Claire.
you. I'm just going to bring it a little back from the whole of the world. Whilst I cover the whole of Wales, apparently there's world outside Wales. Not that I've noticed the past year. I think Laura's point on the identifying where our vulnerabilities lie, both, you know, financially and for a person, something that I've noticed in the last 18 months. And I'm a manager in social housing for anybody who doesn't know. And it's my responsibility to make sure, you know, we have all of our 60 odd million is collected, because if we don't, then we don't have jobs. But at the same token, as much as I'm keeping my debt on a very static, very even level, what I'm also doing is putting far more money into my inclusion service. So for energy this year, I've spent nearly 20 grand in topping up energy, topping up those that are vulnerable for whatever reason, topping up their meters. And I use the same criteria that the NEA use, because I just found it easier just to be able to copy theirs. Nobody is excluded. And quite strangely, I knew it would be like it from the beginning. It came as a shock when I told the DWP we have meetings monthly with the DWP roundtable meeting, and they were quite shocked that, oh, so the majority of people that you're supporting aren't in receipt of any welfare benefit. Well, yeah, you know, for me, there's no shock. But then, I mean, we could talk about the DWP probably until I retire, and all agree that we're never going to get very far. The other area that we've been putting a lot of funding into is supermarket vouchers, and that was something that I set up about 2 or 3 years ago. I think, going back to what Laura said, we cannot underestimate how people are choosing between heating and eating. And I know we said it years ago for all those people like me who have been in benefits since God was small. We said it years ago, but now it's a reality. It's a massive reality. I had a lady in Newport in one of my it's one of my poorer areas that we cover, according to, actually no, Blaenau Gwent would be one of my poorer areas according to the ONS, but Newport is definitely far more financially vulnerable. This lady was cutting up bed sheets to use for sanitary towels because she didn't want to send her kids to school without a packed lunch. And we're 2022, you know,
Absolutely.
as much as, and I'm 50s, so, and I remember being young, you know, and when money was tight, but it's not like that now. It's totally different. So we're finding cost of living dramatically increasing for our tenants, and any type of, so fuel costs to get to work for those in work, they've gone through the roof. And then when they get to work, being able to eat, it's those small things that seem to be going unnoticed. Before I go, I just want to say we are one of the government schemes for the retrofit for decarbonisation. And I had a meeting with Jane Hutt only a few weeks ago, and as Melon Homes were one of the social landlords that were chosen. So I'm in the process of the moment at choosing 20 properties where their EPCs are really quite poor, and then doing the studies on their homes to have retrofit put in. one thing I'm going to say about it, and I'm not going to be negative because I'm not allowed to. So I'm going to say something positive, which is it doesn't fit all. I could put 80 grand's worth of retrofit into Mr. Jones's house. He's hypothetical, by the way. It is not going to make him any better off. So don't be fooled when the government say we are putting all these millions into retrofit to make the whole world a better place. It is absolute nonsense. And that's me being positive. I'm with you, Laura, on the fact that I have gas where I live. I run on oil. You know, am I living in fuel poverty? Massively. Are the government interested in? No, because I'm not a social tenant. So happy to share whatever comes back, happy to share. But yeah, and I'll try and be positive. Sorry.
It's okay.
Can I just ask Claire a question, Malcolm?
Please do, yeah.
So, Claire, I'm in total agreement with you. And whilst I absolutely agree with everybody saying all about poverty and what is poverty, I'm not sure. The longer I do this job, I know what poverty is, because I've come to the conclusion we've all got poverty at some stage. You get that random bill, like you need to go out and buy a washing machine, and all of a sudden you're really poor for a couple of weeks. And I genuinely do believe that traditionally benefit was an indicator of the poor, income support concept. I don't think that's there now. I still say the poverty is for the people that are on the cusp of just too much income, because when that big bill comes in, it tops them over. And then, like you say, with that dreadful situation with that lady, and I'm not surprised about it, because she's putting her kids first before her own needs. Then we've got a safeguarding issue, and it knocks on and knocks on. And from a council point of view, I keep saying this, we're all dealing with the same 20%. We all are in a different guise by whatever our needs are. And that your perfect storm, Malcolm, is absolutely right. But I think the trouble is that everyone fits that box at some stage in the next 12 months.
It does. None of us are having any pay rises, mind. So
no,
my insurance is going up. Wales want their own benefit system, which is going to cost us an extra 26 million in taxes. My taxes are going to go up, idiots, but here we are. My food's gone up, my fuel's gone up. I have no pay rise, so therefore I am having a pay decrease. And no, my wages are fantastic. Yes. I work 1,000, but I would say in-work poverty is now is enormous. And yeah, happy to share, but it's really messy. It's really very, very messy. Along with the agenda, I'm not allowed to evict anyone. I'm not saying I like evicting people. I was one of the only HAs in Wales that didn't evict anybody in 1819, sorry. But I'm not allowed to evict anyone. So you've got, and people know this, some fighting a losing battle.
I think there's one major problem, though, that you going back to your perfect storm diagram, Malcolm, you can't complain about tax increases if you're also asking for extra support. The money has to come from somewhere now. I mean, I'm an old-fashioned Keynesian, and you look back to things like Roosevelt's New Deal, and you think, well, you borrow now to invest for the future. But you have to recognise that yes, if you're going to borrow, you're going to have to have some kind of collateral to do it with, and that involves tax increases. It's a matter of the difference between being progressive and regressive. We've been living through a past couple of years, so the report said this morning, where the 10 richest people in the world doubled their wealth during the pandemic. And I guess if you went to the top 1%, you'd find something pretty similar. And we're just really arguing all the time about trying to do anything other than provide some kind of equality and take from the rich and give to the poor. And I think we have to do that. We have to provide that support by recognising that it needs to be paid for, but ideally paid for by those that can afford it.
Trouble is, though, Gareth, will end up being Cuba.
Great health service.
I partially agree with that, but I live in a very old miners' house. So they were built in like 1850 for the miners. Thick stone. They literally are, they are made out of stone. And explain to me then how I can't get external wall insulation because I literally do not have 14 grand to have it put on my property. I work my backside off for a living and I run voluntary sector associations. So I can't do it because I can't afford it. So theoretically, what you're saying is, yeah, okay, take from the rich, give to the poor. Nobody's giving to me, nobody at all. Because in a statistic,
I'm not poor.
I am not poor. So how
go back to the government that cancelled renovation grants 20 years ago that were available to do that kind of home improvement.
Absolutely, but how do we make the shift? How do we force government to make that shift?
Called the ballot box, I think.
But there's nobody any different.
Well, it is called the ballot box. But I mean, part of the problem here is, and this discussion kind of highlights it, is it because we have so much information now and so much education. We all kind of understand what Keynesian economics and to some aspect. But the question here that Claire is raising is, how do you change the ballot box? And part of that is it's very difficult now to change through the ballot box because we don't particularly have a fair electoral system. And secondly, we kind of filter our information now through social media and of course what the newspapers tell us, and we've seen the newspapers in the last couple of weeks have swung from position to position all over the place. I mean, if you consider at the moment, today's news, where they're quite happily telling us, particularly the red top papers, quite happily telling us that, the BBC is an evil organisation because, the cost of the BBC license is really, really hard on people on low incomes. But this is the same red top newspapers that told us it was perfectly okay to remove the universal credit limits, which obviously are 3 times that amount. It does seem to me as though we've kind of lost that grip on all of this. And I guess my question, which I was kind of raising at the beginning, is how is this also impacting on our workloads for all the people that are on this call that have to administer benefits or social housing or the rest of it? It seems to me with this perfect storm, and Claire's quite right to say this isn't just about people on benefits, this is about in-work poverty. Where is all of that going to go? It's a bottleneck that's going to explode. Are we going to end up with, the sort of kind of poverty that we saw, back a century ago? Is that where it's heading?
Well, if the inequalities are heading that way, then the poverty follows it.
It does, yeah.
It does.
Yeah, all right. Okay, does anybody else want to chip into this conversation at all? I mean, again, I'd be quite interested to see how it's impacting on the workloads at your local authority and what your local authorities are doing in order to prepare for what I think is going to be even larger numbers of people needing some kind of financial support. And if we take Claire's point, they're going to be asking for financial support that doesn't actually exist within the system at the moment. That local authorities.
Can I also ask, Claire, is your organisation thinking about when to start collecting money? I mean, that's pretty much where we are. Is at what point do we go out there and say, okay, you're going to have to pay me that £200 that you owe?
Well, I invested heavily into automation back a few years ago, and I won't bore you with it, but what we found is the inclusion side of my are absolutely flat out, and then the income team are drowning in a workload that is unmanageable because we are not allowed to collect like we should be. Malcolm, I mean, I've known Malcolm and I've known Gareth, I think, since, as I said, God was small. But
small.
Yeah. Workload, yes, my hairdresser is a very rich lady because I have gone so grey through the workload. But it's just a constant barrage. And I'm really negative. I try to see the positive in most things. I can remember Gareth and I doing a capita presentation for PIP all those years ago, and I was so positive that things would change. Oh, how wrong was I? But it's just the constantness. You know, we've got Renting Homes Wales coming in just a couple of months. It's going to throw my world upside down again. And the housing support grant, absolute mess. What a mess this is. We're now going to decide we're going to give it to the local authorities to give to social housing tenants. But you try and apply, because the application process is so damn hard. The criteria is so... I just feel that there's, for the people that do good, so people like us on here now, if you don't start to say no, we're going to drown. We will drown, and that will be the end of it.
Yeah, and that strikes me to be part of the problem. Is it's at what point, as this perfect storm starts to rage, even the most generous of organisations will have to start to say no. There won't be enough money. Lynn Morris, you wanted to say something.
Yes, thanks, Malcolm. I was just going to say that this whole conversation has been really fascinating, and thank you, Claire, thank you, Laura, Gareth, and yourself, Malcolm. I think it is something that has been going on for a long time, whereby if you're working, you're considered to be well off. And that's always been the case. I mean, I've had an example myself personally in the last 3 months. I mean, I've virtually not gone out anywhere for 2 years. I was clinically vulnerable, haven't done anywhere. And then just in the last couple of weeks, literally, I've had an optician's appointment, for example. And the cost of the optician's appointment that I used to have was about £15, £40 for a checkup. You know, and the dentist, I went to the dentist for the first time in 3-4 years. And the treatment, I mean, it's just ridiculous. And the people who are just on that poverty line, you know, who have got no savings, the point that Laura made about washing machines needing fixed and everything else. I mean, it is so true. There is nowhere for people who are just above the welfare benefit line, so not entitled to anything. But they're still the people using food banks. They're still the people who have depleted their savings completely. You know, where do you go from there? Where do you go?
And they would be the sort of people who also need things like DHPs, but then can't get it because they can't get the passporting benefits.
I haven't got the benefit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say,
there is the household grant, though, isn't there? Now that's separate. The household grant from December.
But Laura's point, your point about collection, you know, where do you go from here? But I mean, it depends again on the people that you're targeting. You know, are they coping? Are they struggling? Are they in crisis? You know, just because they're not in benefit doesn't mean they're not one of those. You know, they're struggling or in crisis. And it's very interesting.
Sorry, I was just going to say, and to a certain extent, you don't know who those people are.
No.
Until it's too late.
You can, if you look at a single view of debt, because you've got all that information to hand, certainly within an authority. But then what you don't know is what other debts people have: credit cards, store cards, you know, loans, all sorts. It's quite sort of scary.
Yeah.
We found that the value of debt that somebody held was absolutely irrelevant to whether they were actually living in poverty, only because the pandemic has brought such totally different conditions. And we have found that we are working with a different type of client, whereas 10 years ago, I would be working, or my team would be working solely with those who were claiming income related. But the people that we're working with now are poverty people. They don't like to ask for help. Very few will come to you, and it's holding those conversations.
Absolutely. And I think I read somewhere not long ago, and I'll be brief because I know the time's going, but somewhere not so long ago where it said that almost 50% of people will tell you that they've got a mental health problem, but only 20% of people will tell you that they're in debt.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true enough.
Amazing.
Okay, so on that cheery note, it is 12:41, so I will have to close up because people have meetings and things.
Okay.
Go on.
Sorry, I was just going to say, would it be a good idea? I mean, given that we are probably at the foothills of this problem, that actually, as part of this Connect group, we do keep an eye on it on a regular basis.
Yeah, I think so. I think
by asking from feedback from those authorities that are involved and housing associations that are involved in this in the workshop, because I think we're very much at the foothills.
Yes, I agree, Liz. I think this is just the beginning. I mean, I've got the IFS slide there that talks about what does inflation really mean, and again, whilst it talks about universal credit, this applies equally to wage increases. And I think I've also got some slide on here, TUC on pay as well, talking about pay itself and stagnation within pay. I'll circulate these slides with this information in. I'll put them into the chat and send them out over the WhatsApp group. If anybody still doesn't get them, if they can just email me and I'll ping them across to you. We'll put them on the website as well, so you can grab them off there. Yeah, I think you're all right. We'll try and make this a regular feature as such. What I'd be really grateful for from the delegates, from all of you in local authorities, please send across your ideas how you would want that to happen. It might be something around benchmarking. It might be that we do some special sessions. You might want us to concentrate on a specific area. There's sharing of information, certainly the high level information. Just send across your thoughts on what you'd like us to do, and then we're quite happy to put those into operation. And on that note, I'm going to thank you all for a very interesting conversation. Can I thank you, Gareth?
You're welcome.
Claire, thank you very much for joining in. Laura, thank you for your contributions, and also Liz. Yes, we kept you out a bit, and Lynn as well for your contributions as well.
You're welcome.
And also Kim. Right, and on that basis, I shall see you all next week. Don't forget to send across your ideas about what you want us to discuss. That's gone a little bit quiet over Christmas, but really I am looking for you guys to say this is what we want to talk about, rather than me thinking what you want to talk about. It's useful if what I think you want to talk about is the same thing you do want to talk about. There are no guarantees. And there's a new Batman movie coming out, and I could devote over a whole episode just on the new Batman movie.
Like relief.
Thank you, everyone.
Right. Okay, thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Oh God.